Hello, Tom Lavecchia here with the latest edition of the New Theory podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Heather Zumarraga, who is phenomenal, and we're gonna this is gonna be a good one, guys and gals. She's phenomenal, and she's an author of The Man's Guide to Corporate Culture, a practical guide to the new normal and relating to female coworkers in the modern workplace. Heather, welcome to the New Theory podcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Tom, I'm good. Good to be here.
So here's what jumped at me. Okay. So The Man's Guide to Corporate Culture. So is that like the acknowledgement of saying, hey, you know what? It's majority of men. You need to get with it. Was it a little cheeky? Walk us through, because that jumped at me.
Well, no, the intention was to help men. It wasn't like a feminist book that's bashing men or another, woman or any gender telling men how they should act and what they should do and be in the workplace. I actually, even though I do some of that in the book, my true intentions were to help men, the good guys out there, those that are maybe worried about getting in trouble in this new politically sensitive environment, coupled with the new rules passed, Me Too movement, and more women working than ever alongside men. There's so many books written to help women in the workplace. And I just said, hey, what about the men? Like Tom, I don't know if you're a minority or middle-aged white guy, if that's okay to
middle-aged, that's for sure.
Well, but then you're forgotten about. So it's like everyone else feels included or starting to feel that way, which was a necessary shift. And now the men are forgotten about.
Okay, I'm gonna run something by you, okay? And I wasn't gonna talk about this, but you're the expert, so I do want to talk about this. Okay, so anybody who knows me, I have the New Theory podcast. I also have another podcast, MBA and Button Man, totally different directions. I have two podcasts, right? But then I also own a magazine out of New Jersey, and I wanted to do a business seminar to help New Jersey businesses called New Jersey Business Now. 1 hour, each speaker gets 12 minutes, keynote gets 15. Let's get it done. So we topped it off with Eric LeGrand, who, I don't know if you heard of him. He was playing for Rutgers football. He got hurt, was going to go pro, became paralyzed, turned his life around. So we nailed an awesome keynote for a virtual event, right? And then I had 3 speakers that I knew, right? So we launched it, didn't think nothing of it. I asked some other speakers, they didn't coordinate. And the first thing on our digest, Instagram, we were attacked a little bit. Like, well, why don't you have any female speakers? And I wanted to take the time to reflect, because I said, well, wait a second, why don't we have more female speakers? And candidly, not to justify, but like, I grew up in a house with 3 women. I grew up with my mom. We didn't have a father in the house. I actually pride myself on being a female centric person, right? But then I'm like, wait a second, I did take some time to reflect, and I found that to be vicinity, right? I'm like, wait a second, I need to be around more female entrepreneurs. So we did add a 5th speaker who happens to be a female. I wasn't like, well, I got to do it just because this person suggested it. But I'm like, no, adding a person, adding a person or add value. So let's assume that I'm a good person, right? And I make that faux pas. Why do guys like me that are good people are still making, and I don't call it a mistake, and it wasn't intentional, but it did not resonate. And we were going to have a female centered event in May. And then she was like, well, you don't need to have a female centered event, just have 50-50. I'm like, well, like now there's difference of like, you disagreeing with me actively. We could have an active disagreement. And there's another one, you're coming for me. So like, I kind of didn't want to disengage from that conversation, but I took the time to reflect. So why do good guys like me still maybe not lead in the way we're supposed to lead?
Well, it's simple. And you said it. I appreciate your honesty and your candor, because you said it. You said, look, I was just inviting the people that I knew of, or those people that maybe you have run into or had relations in the past, or maybe friends with, or have common associates, a part of your network, maybe outside of your family, because you grew up with a great group of women. It sounds like it's just those people closest to you. It's just natural. You're not going to go out of your way unless you have some quota to find women, unless you happen to know, like me or someone else, hey, Heather, come speak at this event.
Yeah.
You happen to know really good male speakers or people that played football, which are men.
Yeah.
And that was a fit. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
But the problem is, and you got pushback because people think it was an intentional move or mistake. I don't think it was a mistake. There are those that will call it a mistake because that's the world we live in today.
Yeah.
It's just you're hiring those people that are closest to you, that are in your network, and maybe they happen to be mainly men.
Well, so I called my go-to, who is my sister, and I don't say which one. There's three because they don't get involved with the podcast. But the one sister I called is like in the League of Women, like just the go-to person for this type of stuff. And she was even like, you know what? Like you add a female, and you're gonna look like you're kind of like patronizing, if you will, patronizing.
So then, no matter what you do, you're wrong.
And if you don't, yeah. So you're the expert. Like, help me help other people.
Okay, so now that you know this with hindsight, maybe you brought in your network or you asked one of the guys that is speaking, hey, you happen to know a woman that would be good for this. You don't just see, the problem is, which I'm a big advocate of, you hire the best person for the job.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get too far into diversity and inclusion and stuff like that. But if the best person for the job is, you know, all men like you, then it is what it is. But the way the future is heading, and I mentioned this in the book, I said you can either jump on the diversity and inclusion bandwagon or get dragged by it.
Yeah, good point.
There are a lot of people that are like, well, maybe you shouldn't say it in that way, but that's the truth. That's the way the future is going. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to say right or wrong. You know, the point is, you will be including women in these upcoming events. You know, it will be hopefully a natural process. I know it hasn't been that way for you yet. Yeah. But on the next one, okay, maybe you include 2 women, so then you don't get the pushback of, oh, she's the token woman, which no matter what, you feel like I'm wrong either way. If I include a woman, they say I'm just doing it to be inclusive. And if I don't, I get criticized for not including women. So the best thing to do is, like I said, you jump on this sort of inclusion bandwagon. You ask your guy friends that are part of it, you know, a woman that would be appropriate, not just out of left field, you know, someone who fits in the same mold and dynamic. Obviously, women don't play football. I think there's good reason for that, but maybe there's, I don't know, a WNBA player or someone that plays tennis that you bring in alongside.
Well, so the narrative of the football players, he got hurt, and then now he's like starting like a coffee house, and totally went a different direction. So like, but I 100% get what you're saying. So now I want to kind of target the gentlemen who should be reading your book, and it should be, having you consult and so forth. So what are leaderships? And I want to, you know what, I'm going to ask this. The gentleman in the C-suite versus maybe the entrepreneur, which is a little bit more loosey-goosey startup environment. True entrepreneur, not small business. True entrepreneur. Are the rules and how they should approach females in the workplace the same? Or do you maybe say, in corporate it's this, I know the entrepreneur is a little loosey-goosey, it's this. Give us the differences. Should there be differences? Or should there not be differences? I want to get a feel for that.
Well, right. I think there should be differences from this perspective. That again, in the title of the book, The Man's Guide to Corporate Culture, it is for a corporate culture environment. If you're talking about a startup tech company in Silicon Valley, where you're bringing your dog to work and playing video games at lunchtime, that's the only reason I say there may be differences, because you may not be wearing a suit and tie to work. You may not be in the same cultural environment as a corporate setting. So it's up to the definition of what a corporate setting would be. And I think it's more along the lines of your entrepreneurial example. And one of these big corporations, take any of the Fortune 500 companies or any of those in like the S&P 500. You look at your Microsoft, or even, Apple and some of these other tech companies, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they are big corporations, right? But I don't know that I would say that they have a corporate culture, again, because they're tech companies in Silicon Valley. They've kind of escaped that, or managed to avoid it. And they're fostering a culture that is more casual. Maybe you don't wear a suit and tie to work.
Yeah.
And maybe um, you can work from home. That's a different dynamic, which also has really occurred during the pandemic, where over half of Americans
Correct.
have work from home and they have no intention. Some people like, I don't want to go back to an office. Do you?
Not at all. Not at all. Well, so that's my follow-up question. So has COVID, like, so now I think COVID, and I'm not talking about the public health and the individual health perspective. I just got the phone with a friend who I just found out, and I'm not a super close friend, but somebody I grew up with, was hospitalized for a month and was critically ill. So like this shit's real. And then we had some people in our family die from it. So I don't want to touch that part, but I want to be sensitive to it. But from the business perspective, I feel that COVID, aside for certain industries like hospitality and stuff, but certain industries like kind of washed out weaker companies. If you had a weak balance sheet, weak people, a weak value proposition, I think COVID just sped up your close death. I think there's a lot of zombie companies out there that, will die or get out of it. But I think what COVID has done is, hey, you got to work from home, and we need people now to produce and execute. No more bullshitting, and I don't care what race, gender, creed, etc. We just need shit to get done, right? So, but there's a lot of biases, and we get into all that later. But my question is, what impact has COVID had on leading a corporate culture? And in your opinion, has it helped, kept neutral, or hurt women in terms of the workplace?
Well, I think two things. It's helped women in terms of being able to, here's a problem. As a woman, there are many times, and I don't speak for all women, but there is somewhat of a consensus, I'd like to think, or the majority, that would love to work from home because of the work from home, the flexibility that teleworking or telecommuting provides, so that I can take care of my 5-year-old child if schools are shut down, or I can pick her up and drop her off on time without hiring somebody else to do it, and take care of household chores, which, like it or not, again, right or wrong, are usually female and women dominated. That's who's taking care of the house. Now, there are some men that do household chores, but the majority are the women. So I think that's benefited women. However, in terms of relationships, like, for example, right now we're having a discussion over Zoom. A lot of companies are having Zoom discussions, Cisco, WebEx, and Skype, and they're utilizing that very well. And it's actually increased productivity in some cases because you're reducing the travel time. You don't have to be in a plane, bus, ferry, or train, a subway to get to work for an hour in the morning. Instead, you're already there. You just come to wherever your computer is, your home office, or wherever it exists in your house. And so that has, I think it's taken a toll on relationships. Dr. Fauci, for example, said we may never shake hands again. Now, I don't think that'll happen. I think we will shake hands again. The elbow bump and the fist bumps are great, but I think in a corporate setting, eventually we will shake hands again. But it's very difficult to have one-on-one relationships that form a solid bond. I mean, I like this. It's better than talking on the phone, but in order to really know you and meet you, I need to be with you in person. And you are lacking, you mentioned this, what happens to the culture? The culture suffers, no doubt about it, 100%, because everybody's working remotely, the majority. So it's very difficult to especially train new hires and adapt and mold them into the culture that you're trying to develop. It makes it difficult.
So let's get to it. What are some tips, specific tips, and it can be from your book or just from your personal tips for both male and female leaders to make sure that you have an inclusive, female inclusive environment?
Right. Well, I start with the differences, which a lot of people don't like to point out, I think, because again, you can get some pushback by saying things like women are sensitive. I don't recommend you saying something like that, but someone like me as a woman can get away with it because in general, we do have inherent psychological and cognitive differences. And although I'm not a doctor or a scientist, I spoke with many. I spoke with about, I don't know, over 20 or 30 research cognitive psychologists as well as doctors that say from birth, there are psychological differences between the genders. And what's so funny is that, I don't know if you ever heard of or read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I think I read, I definitely heard about it, read articles on it.
Right.
I don't know the full details
Well,
of it, though.
so it's not specific to the workplace, but it's more like how to relate to your significant other, your spouse, or maybe if you're just dating. It's not a book made for dating, but it is a book on how to relate better to the opposite gender. One thing, if you type in the Google search bar, why do male managers? The autocomplete is avoid female employees. So 60% of men, there's a study show, are uncomfortable working one-on-one with female employees. And this is more recent post Me Too movement, which hasn't been as big of a problem as we've been remote. I'm still sure like bullying or some type of sexual harassment or intimidation goes on online, but it's a lot harder than it is in person.
Correct.
Like
correct.
to grab somebody's butt or something, I can't reach through the computer and do that. So there are pros and cons, but I think first and foremost, when we talk about how do you create a more inclusive environment, you have to recognize that there are differences. Women in general, for example, I think are more sensitive. So when you have to be careful as a woman when you're asking, I want equality. I get that women want to be paid the same for the same job, the gender pay gap, but really, do I really want, like how you talk to your friend from Rutgers, would I want, if call it locker room talk or whatever you want, would I want that if I worked for you in the workplace or with you? I don't know, like one-on-one at a bar, just having a discussion we're having now, yes, but you have to be careful what you wish for, because you're asking for true equality, then I'm asking you to treat me no differently than you treat your male buddies. And, I don't know that I want that.
Yeah, good point. Now with Zoom, right? So let's hope, obviously, with these decentralized office space for now, there's less pressure to say, hey, we're all going for happy hour, you want to come, so hopefully that doesn't happen. And if you do have a cocktail, it's together over Zoom and in the protection of your own home. So I think inherently some of this stuff that were pitfalls or traps or just inappropriate stuff, I think some of that's going to wash out, right? However, just like anything else, there's unintended consequences. In the new Zoom environment, are there any stuff to look out for or that may pop up now? Could be, hey, maybe like your boss is in his like underwear, like, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but
hey,
like
what happened to
what are some of the things that are maybe unintended consequences of the Zoom environment that you've been hearing?
Well, you always wear pants. That happened. I won't say names, but there are specific high profile people in the media that have been caught, for lack of a better word, with their pants down. And obviously
no pun intended.
Yeah. Obviously it wasn't intentional. But the thing is, like, the Zoom camera is always on. So full disclosure, I'm wearing jeans. So, I don't have the matching suit.
I got my workout pants. Even though I don't work out, I got workout pants on.
Shorts. No, I mean, well, and I have to wear a blazer because I also have work, and it's still like the financial services industry is still corporate setting, even though I'm from home. But at least you can do is wear pants. If you're wearing shorts, doesn't matter man or woman, make sure your shirt is not too long where it covers your shorts, which yours is not. Yeah. Because if you get up and use the restroom or you think the call's over, click, we're done, we're ending the call, and the camera doesn't go off, if your shirt is covering your shorts, it's almost just as bad as not wearing any, because then everyone thinks, oh my gosh, you're not wearing pants. So I would stick with, I'm not saying you're going to wear a suit and tie for Zoom. Again, I'm not, but somewhat at least be fully dressed. I would have some type of shoes on, at least flip-flops too, because you never know who's watching. Look, if you're a boss and you're a manager of your own company, you don't have these same worries. But if you're working for a company and you are an employee and you have management that is on these calls, you want to always put your best foot forward and show your best. If you work in that type of corporate setting, again, it's all industry focused and related. There is a company, I think it's called Cloud Bees, which has these netiquette rules, it's called. So instead of etiquette, it's called netiquette, like online etiquette. And one of the tips was to change the time zones. Like I'm in Florida, so I have an Eastern time zone.
You're EST, yeah.
Yeah, where are you?
New Jersey, so I'm EST.
Oh, okay,
as well.
same. But like, what if somebody is in California and we're always doing our meeting at 9 a.m. Eastern? So one thing is rotate time zones to be more considerate for those people that they might not even be awake on the West Coast. So
good point. So hold on. So I want to, before we, because there's a few more points I want to hit. So give us some actionable tips. People listening this far are interested in it. Give us some actionable tips for leaders, male and female, specifically. They got to get your book, put a link, but give us some actionable tips on how to lead in this environment.
All people want to be appreciated, right?
Yes.
So one of my first and foremost tips is appreciation as a male manager or any gender. I think that's key, but how do you do it? Now, if you're a man giving compliments to a female, never about appearance if you work with them, unless you're in an appearance industry. I always make that little asterisk, side note, because if you work in the media industry or a cosmetic business, obviously you're going to comment on appearance. That has to do with your industry. However, if you're in a corporate setting that's not appearance dominated, make the compliments the appreciation about their work. And a lot of men have asked me, but Heather, what if someone looks great, they got a haircut, they've got a new dress on or a new suit? And I'm like, it's not that you can't do it. It's that to be safe and to protect yourself. Again, I'm looking out for men in general. The whole key was protect your reputation as a good guy, where you may say something that's well-intentioned and then get in trouble for it. So how do you protect your reputation and your job? Maybe you don't lose your job, but if you get a red flag warning from HR, that's enough. Losing your reputation may hurt even more. So never make the compliments about anybody else's appearance in the workplace. Outside of the workplace, fine. And secondly, remove the word I from the compliment. So instead of, as a manager, saying, I like your work, Susan, you would say your work is very detailed. Good job. Because that way, by removing the word I, the person is then not doing it for you. You're giving them the self-confidence. You're putting all of the weight in their shoes, where they now feel like they did it for them and the company, and they're not doing it for you. And again, and protect yourself, because they're not gonna say, hey, Joe Schmo said that I did really good on this work, as if I'm doing it for him, but I'm doing it because I like to do a good job and put my best foot forward. So remove the word I from the compliment, and always keep it about workplace accomplishments if you can.
Now, two questions, might be a little tough, but not for you, but in general. The first part of the question
There's
is,
my dog. Sorry.
hello, it's all right. Usually my cat is like on the screen. Well, cats, but usually one cat just decides to disrupt. So one question is politics, right? We're in a powder keg right now. Let's call it what it is, right? So what happens when you're a leader and you have a team, and you're appropriate, keep politics out of it, you stay apolitical. However, it seeps into conversations or seeps into environment. Somebody puts something on their desk at work that's maybe deemed inappropriate. How do you go through that labyrinth of dealing with the politics in the workplace?
With the politics of being inappropriate, perhaps?
Well, I mean, so for example, you're a political company, but people share their views.
Right. Well, okay. Yeah. And this is happening more and more in the media. Good point. So my best advice would be, well, it stems from the top. So it's leadership at the top. And if you've exhibited and fostered a corporate culture that is, I would shy away from being very expressing your opinions on politics in a corporate culture. Yeah. And I know that corporations have a lot of power, and this is a trend that's happening right now. They're making comments on political stuff, various companies from Coca-Cola, Amazon, etc.
Recently, correct, Delta.
Yes. So I think if you want to avoid that and you're a leader, you actually keep it more work focused and discourage any communication about politics in the workplace, because if you're doing it at the top and taking a stance on various issues, not only are you maybe alienating half of your customers as a poor or bad business decision, your employees may disagree. And then you'll see, if they hate Trump, they'll put a Biden poster up. And if they hate, Biden, they put a Trump poster up. And so if you don't want that, I would discourage that in the office, but have groups outside of the office that you encourage them to be a part of, but not as part of everyday corporate life.
Now, conversely, and millennial and Gen Z are good for this, right? Me, I take my paycheck and I tend not to get involved, right? But what about if you're within an organization and you need the paycheck, or it's your vocation, or let's say you're a lawyer and you're a staff lawyer, you like the company, but however, and again, there's companies, and that's okay, that are open about their agendas, right? And I'm just saying, in general, what if you're an employee, and again, a lot of millennial and Gen Z, and Beyonce, Gen Z, they have troubles with if their personal political beliefs are not aligned with the company's beliefs. What are your recommendations to those particular people? Because I'll give you the old school thought. It's like, that's your check. Don't get involved, take your money and go home, and if you don't like it, like, I kind of leave. I don't like to say that, but that's the old school way. But on the other end, it's like, you know what? Like, if you accept a paycheck with something you don't align personally, maybe you should get out, and maybe you might take a career disruption, but you can keep your beliefs. Where do you stand on that? That's a tough one.
That is a very, very difficult question. I think personal for everyone, whereas you're saying in the old school way, you just deal with it, and it is what it is. You take your check, you leave, and it doesn't so much bother you. But now it's so much in your face with social media, for example. And I'll try and cover her up. And social media is everywhere. You can't really escape it. So if your political beliefs are not aligned with the activist shareholders and corporate leaders, me personally, I would leave. But you're saying, what if you're not in a position to financially, or if you can't get another job, or there aren't other job openings? I think you do have a right as an employee to go to HR and say that those things bother you. Is there a way they can tone down some of the rhetoric as a corporation as a whole? Now, it doesn't mean that change is going to happen, but I do think you have a voice and you should speak up. And again, I don't like it, but this is the way, this is a trend that big corporations are activists on many issues, not just politics. And I think it's only going to get bigger and become a bigger issue. And so before you sign up and apply to a place, you better make sure, if they're outspoken on those issues, that your thoughts and ideology aligns, or you're right, you might be miserable. And that's not good for anyone.
Love it. So Heather Zumarraga, The Man's Guide to Corporate Culture, a practical guide to the new normal and relating to female coworkers in the modern workplace. Heather, how can we find you?
Twitter at Heather Zuma, Instagram Heather.Zumarraga. Thanks so much, Tom.
My pleasure. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this with friends, because this is a good one. Thank you for being on, Heather.
Thanks, Tom.